Okay, awesome. So good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to another episode of the Engineering Leaders podcast series, where we are actually bringing together engineering leaders from various fields to pick their brain and their experiences on how a young aspiring engineer like yourself can succeed and have an exciting career ahead of them. So today we are actually joined by Dr. Sanjay, who is currently the Chief Technology Officer at Global Center for Maritime Decarbonisation, with over 25 years of experience working across energy sector in the industry in the field of renewables, maritime, oil and gas consulting. So Dr. Sanjay has actually previously worked and even held many positions as a managing director, okay, in the maritime and energy companies such as ExxonMobil, Energy Market Authority, and Singapore Maritime Institute, where he has many years of experience leading high-performing engineering teams to push out innovative clean energy technology to lead the change in decarbonization efforts. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Sanjay to the show. So yeah, Dr. Sanjay, really excited to have you on the show and for you to share your knowledge and experience. Yep.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks for this opportunity. Happy to.
Okay, awesome. So, Dr. Sanjay, perhaps you could introduce a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing at the moment.
Yeah, sure. The Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization, or GCMD in short, was set up in August 2021. It was a collaboration initiated by MPA after they presented to then Minister Ong Yew Kiong, who was the Minister of Transport, that the recommendation is to set up a center like this in Singapore. And the MPA managed to garner private sector funding to jointly fund the center, which has its mission statement as to help the maritime sector eliminate GHG emissions. And we do it in four ways. One is by shaping standards, deploying solutions, financing projects, and creating a collaborative platform across the ecosystem.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, thanks for that introduction. And, I actually saw that you started your journey in microbiology and biochemistry. So even actually spending a few years in the research field before moving to ExxonMobil. Just curious, what made you pursue microbiology and biochemistry at first, and what made you eventually change field altogether?
I see. Well, at that time, it was a subject that I thought it was interesting. And when I was younger, I was aspiring to maybe find an answer to cancer. So I looked at these subjects which could have been relevant in understanding cell biology. So that's why I studied it. Yeah, that's how I chose my subjects those days in university.
I see, but what actually made you eventually switch over to maritime oil and gas trade, the
Yeah,
industry?
so when I was doing my postdoc at the Institute of Molecular and Cell Biology, I realized that maybe I'm not really cut out to excel in this space, and so therefore so I had to make a change, and a friend of mine introduced me to ExxonMobil, and that time it was called Exxon. So this was in 1994. And yeah, Exxon took me in, and then I changed career and tried my hand at becoming a field engineer, and yeah.
Okay, and I mean, I'm just very curious as well, because I saw, a lot of your career actually started in engineering, but eventually you do pick up skill sets in terms of business administrations, notably at the INSEAD Academy, and eventually also held consultancy and leadership roles in like big companies like McKinsey and EMA. So, what was the journey like actually moving from an engineer and eventually pivoting towards a more business development kind of role?
Yeah, so most organizations have what you call the leadership track and the technical track. And I'm not a qualified engineer. I never studied engineering, right? So whilst I could do I could learn, and I learned a lot on the job as a field engineer in ExxonMobil, also even a process engineer at the refinery. While I could learn all these things, I mean, it's not rocket science. The ability to truly excel in engineering, you need a proper engineering degree, right? And doing well is one thing, excelling is another thing, right? And also, I guess the organizations that I work for recognize my leadership potential, so got me into the leadership space as well. And of course, they sponsored my executive courses at INSEAD, and so that's when I started straddling the leadership space over and looking after the technological space. But I depended on real engineers to get the real work done.
I see, I see. And what were some of the biggest challenges that in the transition you actually face? Did you face any big challenges? Because I know that you started in the research space and you move on to Exxon.
Yeah, I guess the big challenge was convincing people who didn't believe that you can change from one field to another. So you had to work a lot harder to prove yourself, to change their mindsets. And I recall when I was in the refinery, the head of process engineering basically told me he didn't agree that I should be there. And if I made one mistake, he's going to send me back to my previous department, which made me work even harder and prove to him that I can do the job if I put my mind to it. Yeah, and I survived. I did the job. I even designed a pipeline, which
Yeah,
is still running in the refinery. But I think convincing people that you are good enough is a constant challenge in every job you take. So it's very important to continue to believe in yourself, but it does come with hard work. I mean, hard work is something you cannot eliminate, no matter how much politics you want to try and play. Ultimately, hard work and demonstration of capabilities is the best way to keep your critics quiet.
I see. Actually, I have also several like engineering friends, like, they also are also undergoing some form of transition. And of course, I think the biggest challenge, like what you mentioned, is really about, how do I stay focused amidst people who don't believe in you. So, and of course, I believe you have went through that emotional, struggle, okay, because you are pretty much on your own now. So I'm just curious, like, how do you actually cycle yourself, or of course like get over this emotional struggle lah that you might initially have, and really stay focused on what you need to do?
Uh, every morning I say my morning prayers. Trust God that He will get me through the day, and just believe in myself. And don't let the noise outside distract you from the voice within, and then just focus on what needs to be done. You know what I mean? You just have to realize that um, you cannot let outside noises distract you from your path. You got to believe in yourself, and don't let anyone tell you you're. And that's why I think one thing I also do, I mean, you realize that this is my eighth job. I keep changing jobs. But the one thing I always did was to be honest with myself. So if I knew I couldn't do something, I would always evaluate. I'll always do self-evaluation and
Yeah,
know where my strengths are and know where my weaknesses are. And if I can plug and close the weakness by more studying or reading or talking to experts and learning from others, I would close that gap. But some gaps you can't close, and it's to recognize where your weaknesses are so you learn how to manage around it, right? Either by working with others and finding other ways to close that gap, right? But I think to say you're always good in everything and create that expectation can also be very stressful because you may not be able to deliver. So being honest with yourself is a very important part of the journey, lah.
I see, I see. Oh, actually, speaking of like honesty and being very honest with your abilities and your current shortfalls and deficiencies. So I actually there's this engineering leader that I've spoken to, and they also mentioned how many young engineers who actually apply for jobs, they overstate whatever they can actually do on the resume, and when they actually comes into the interview itself, right? They just embarrass themselves. So he said that if you
Correct.
whatever put in your resume, you better be able to deliver it, and always be very honest about what you can and cannot do. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing and reminding us about the importance of integrity in our work. So Dr. Sanjay, you had a fairly long career in ExxonMobil. I would say about 10, 11 years. And
Yeah.
I believe that was where you actually first started your journey in the oil and gas industry and eventually into sustainable energy and decarbonization efforts. So I'm just curious, could you share, some of your experiences in ExxonMobil, and how did that journey eventually culminate in becoming a Asia Pacific technical response manager there?
Yeah. The, the thing about good about ExxonMobil then was if you did well, you had an opportunity to try different portfolios of work. So I went from field engineer to business development and then looking after the country and then went to the refining sector, and then you work your way up, right? So um, what my philosophy then was to learn as much as possible, right? Because I was new in the industry. So there are two ways you can learn. One is through the job itself. So you're always open to enter where you are least comfortable. So, people like to stay in their comfort zone, right? I'm a bit of the opposite. I like to be in a discomfort zone because when I'm in a discomfort zone, I'm constantly growing, right? Because I'm always learning and growing until I become comfortable. Then I get bored. Then I want to move to another zone of discomfort, right? So I can continue to learn. And I think the willingness to learn and admit that when you go into a zone of discomfort, you will realize that you will be behind those who are already there. But it's not a problem. That shouldn't be something to be fearful of because you are going to an area which you are not familiar with. But to focus on growth and learning and excelling, right, makes you gives you the ability to expand your knowledge base, which is very important if you really want to slowly move up the ladder, because the more you know about the total business, more that you can get a senior position that allows you to understand the total business, right? That needs to manage the total business. And I think this is where it's very important to in order to progress, whether upwards or even sideways, you need to be courageous enough to put yourself where you're not comfortable, and which means hard work to learn new things. And then that will pay benefit and returns later on. So
Awesome.
ExxonMobil gave me that space to do that.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so if I were to summarize what you have mentioned, the key idea is to really be very involved in your work and understand the process from start to end so that, when bosses, or let's say your employers, okay, see how you progress and also really understand the whole business, then they are more confident to actually move you up, because moving up means that you need to understand the business in a much more deeper level.
Yeah.
Mm, correct, right? And of course, by having
Yes.
that interest at the start means that if you have a vested interest in the development as well as the progress of the company. Am I right to say that?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. In fact, I had one senior manager who told me, he said, you should spend an hour or two every week talking to other departments that is not related to your work. and take them go out for coffee and then understand their business as well. Because ExxonMobil is a very integrated business, right? So go and learn about other departments, what they are doing, and then you slowly are able to join all the dots, right? Rather than just being stuck in your own world. So networking and learning from others are all very important aspects if you want to grow in one organization. Uh,
I see, I see. Wow, thanks for sharing those nuggets of wisdom. And actually I recalled last time there was one engineering leader also mentioned, sometimes when we network, right, we tend to network with the idea of asking people like for a favor, but without actually giving back. Actually, but what he actually shifted my paradigm was that, when we ask for a favor, or let's say even for coffee, always volunteer to see how it's beneficial for him, to actually go out with you as well. Is there something that you can help him with, or maybe do even a simple like recommendations as well? Yeah, so actually these two concepts are very useful to help engineers to grow in their career. Yeah.
sure.
And yeah, so I was just curious as well, because I believe that ExxonMobil was a very good training platform for you to eventually go up and have much more career opportunities. So how did those experiences that you had eventually lead to future roles in business development, like what you're doing right now?
Yeah, I changed jobs quite a bit, right? In fact, it's been 7 times. One thing I never, I think all but the most recent, no, in fact, the one before. Every time I change job, I take a pay cut. Pay was never that important to me when I was trying to progress and learn. So even when I went from Exxon to McKinsey, I took a pay cut. When I went from McKinsey to EMA, I took a pay cut. From EMA to DNV, I took a pay cut. You know what I mean? Because I realized that the window of opportunity to learn something is far valuable than an increment. Because eventually,
Mhm.
whatever cut you take, you will make back within 1 year already or 2 years in
I
the
see.
next organization. But the window of opportunity to enter and learn something is very narrow. It comes once in a lifetime or once in a while,
I see.
right? And that in itself has value. So if you take absolute pay like cash versus the what you cannot monetize in terms of opportunity in the immediate sense, right?
Mm,
You need to take a holistic view when you look at opportunities, right?
mm,
And whether they come easily or not. So that is one thing I was very clear about when I make a move, that I will not think of just the pay. I think about the growth opportunities, what I could learn, and then see, that there would be potential upside eventually. But that first initial change is the value of the opportunity must be
mm.
factored in. You know what I
I
mean?
see.
So when I look at all the things I learned, whether I go from technical to field to business development to consulting and everything, it was all about learning experiences. Because
Mm,
I knew at one day I will have to bring all these things together. I never forget things. I never forget experiences, and so that I can always leverage it. It becomes my library of knowledge that I bring along, so I can always leverage it in my next job, right?
mm,
So and I think that is important. I think to be constantly learning and creating your library, whether it's knowledge or networks, whatever it is never time bound. It's something that you bring along with you until you retire or pass away, right? So you always have that constant challenging of yourself. So it doesn't matter whether I went from technical to business development, because from business development I went back to technical, right? But when I go back to technical, but I understand business development, it makes me richer as a technical support manager
mm.
because I understand the business already. You know what I mean? So
Oh, right.
everything is connected, and you can build a foundation from lah.
Okay, awesome, awesome, awesome. Wow, actually what you have mentioned is also rings true for, the work that I'm in, entrepreneurship. I think a lot of times, young entrepreneurs, they tend to always seek the next best thing that will earn them the big bucks, but a lot of them do not really think about, sacrificing a lot of the short-term results or at least short-term outcomes for more longer game kind of like outcomes. Like, sometimes,
Yep.
instead of
Yeah.
like reinvesting back into the business or even education, but a lot of them just choose to buy more material goods and fancy cars and whatnot lah. Yeah,
Correct.
so
Correct.
I mean it's a very but I mean I'm glad that you actually brought this up because this is something that a lot of engineers needs to hear. Sometimes I think people are too caught up with like the monetary compensation. So, but Dr. Sanjay, I'm just very, very curious as well, right? You mentioned that when you actually moved to another company, then you actually got a pay cut, right? So, for that interaction, why did like the companies actually give you a pay cut? Was it like you told them that you are willing to take a pay cut for this opportunity, or like they just offered that pay cut?
No, 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 no. It is normally most companies have a structured pay scale,
Mm,
right? So the position that you're entering, right, has a min max bound. So it could be policy driven or whatever it is. They can only pay you so much, right? For when you at the entry level, because that's the level you're entering. But they want you because of your experience, right? So to me, when people negotiate for extra $100 here, $200, it's really waste time, because if you are negotiating for that extra money, right, and you don't see the value of what you will learn, then you create a very wrong basis of your movement already. If you're just moving for money, then don't go and look for that $100. Go and look for $1,000, $2,000. I used to tell my staff, if you want to leave this organization, make sure you move for at least $1,000 more, right? Because if you are really focused on money, then go for the big one, right? Don't just move for the sake of moving, because unless you know exactly what value you're getting out from the second organization. But all organizations have a very structured salary structure. This is very formalized, have a fixed band. You cannot want to come in at a low band but expect a high band salary. You know what I mean? So to me, I just decided. I look at the job scope. I want to learn. Is the other way is you pay for training course, what? So whether you get more money, or so you're gonna pay for something else, right? You know what I mean? Here you get on the job training, more structured as well. So it wasn't I was saying, hey, I will take a pay cut. No, no, it's not that. It's just that, when they offer me the job, they give you the salary, then you gotta ask yourself, lah, how much you want to negotiate, lor.
awesome.
I
Okay.
probably did. I probably only negotiated once, but that was in my most recent years only. I already getting old, man. Not much runway already. So, you know. But when I was young, I didn't bother. I just focus on experience and knowledge.
Mm. I'm just curious because of your, you never really negotiate. You are always going with the learner's attitude, right? Did they somehow actually improve the impression that employees have about you as a person?
Uh, I don't think at the employment stage. I think the employer's impression is always driven by what you do. Coming in is one thing, staying and doing is another. So no matter what baggage, whether you got a Harvard degree or you got a first class honors and everything, don't think that that is the reason why everyone should respect you and worship you and everything. That only got you in the door. How you journey after that, from door to door, from floor to floor, is how well you do, how well you treat people, right? And your action is more important than your past. So every day I work to make sure that I'm proving my worth, right? And then I think that's more important than whatever, whether I got PhD or Harvard, or it doesn't matter, right? It's all useless if I cannot do a simple job well, right? So
Okay. So, Dr. Sanjay, I also saw from your LinkedIn as well that you are an active contributor in the field of climate change and sustainable energy space. So, could you share with the audiences, what are some of the biggest problems the world is currently facing now that we are really not aware of when it comes to climate change and decarbonization?
uh, I don't think people are convinced that we have a climate change issue. So a lot of people are still bogged down by their daily pressures, right? Is whether it's put food on the table, keeping a job, uh, you know, looking after family, especially aging parents or young kids. These are your daily pressures, right? And this is really top of mind. Something like climate change is a bit too far away for majority of the people, unless you are in that space. Then it becomes your job. It becomes your daily psyche. You're always constantly thinking about the issues around climate change. But I think for majority of people, it is slightly further out, and that's a big challenge in this efforts. So the governments, I think important that governments first make a statement that it is real. I think that's very important. And I think when Prime Minister did that a few years ago, I think in 2018 or 2019, he actually said in Parliament it's an existential threat. And that's only what, 3, 4 years ago only, that we admitted that climate change is a threat, right? It's only last year that we actually have a green plan, right? An official green plan. I mean, technically for Singaporeans, for most people said, "Oh, okay, finally someone admitted that it is a problem, right?" And now we have a plan to solve the problem. But for majority, there's a lot of coffee shop argument. Is it real, not real? Then you have big companies saying it's not real, or politicians saying it's not real. So there's a lot of noise, right? There is no consensus, there's debate and everything. Although you can say 99% of the scientists around the world say we have a problem, but the common man doesn't read the science, right? So you need to recognize that. So I think every single effort now that every country is doing, the education process with our children, the children are learning about climate change from early days. So for them, it's going to become more second nature. Is our generation, maybe my generation, and maybe your generation, where we weren't taught in school, right? At least I know when I graduated, climate change was still a bad word. Being green was a bad word, So it's these are real challenges on the ground to get everyone moving together to solve the problem. Nevertheless, I think as far as industry is concerned, a lot of them have taken on board that they need to do something because, through the World Business Council on Sustainable Development and then the UN proclamations with COP27 and IMO and ICAO and everything. So at the industry level, they are banding together to try and solve it. And that's why GCMD exists, because industry is saying we have a problem, we need to learn, we need to contribute to the solution. But I think generally for the most people, that's the major hurdle, at a national level.
I see. Yeah, I actually really agree with you. I think my generation at least, perhaps they don't really see past helping the community and society because of the current problems. They can't even solve their own needs, which is the basic needs of their own survival. To think of something that is
Correct.
beyond them is very hard to think of, lah. But of course, as time progresses, as we become a lot more affluent, my only hope is that more people start to think beyond themselves as well. Yeah, so I think your point on
Sure,
education
sure.
is really interesting. So, is because I also noticed that you do some form of like volunteering work as well. So, I mean, are you involved in such communities in terms of the education space or not that yet?
Uh, well, I'm a council member with the Sustainable Energy Association of Singapore, so we do educate the industry and community through multiple platforms and committees. But my role in the schools, like primary schools and secondary schools, has more has more been around leadership roles and helping, like on the advisory boards and things, helping the principal and the teachers manage their day-to-day or annual challenges and think through stuff. And in some case, at least in my time in Stanford Primary, there was a discussion about sustainability, so I can give my advice and everything. But I'm not actively speaking to students about sustainability. I think there's enough teachers and people really doing ground level sustainability work, right, that are reaching out to students, and I think they're better set for that lah. Um, but my role in educating on sustainability tends to be more corporate and industrial lah.
I see. And since and of course because now you're working at GDMC, so what's your vision that you have working there when it comes to maritime decarbonization?
Yeah, so in GCMD, we don't pick winners. We try to identify barriers to adoption of decarbonization solutions. So we design pilots to generate real world data that will help lower these barriers or fill the gaps. And we hope to provide a neutral, science-based information and insights so that leaders can make the right decision, you know.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so anyways, we've learned a lot about your work and your passion and of course your journey. Now we are actually transitioning to something a little bit more like your personal lah. Because actually I noticed that you actually wrote a poetry book. Am I right to say? I think it was called One Breath Through Pseudo
I've
Haiku.
got three actually.
Oh, you got three. Oh, okay. What are the other two
Yeah, yeah.
poetry books that you've written?
Yeah, so my first book was published in 2009, 2010, called Where Fires Rage.
Mhm.
And then In One Breath was published in 2021, I think. And then last year I published my third book, Under the Spell of Flickering Lights. That was published last year. So yeah, I've got three poetry books.
Oh, okay. So actually, I mean, just curious, when did you actually got your passion for poetry and what made you actually pursue it?
My mom is a poet and a writer. So when I was 15, 16 years old, I think her first book came out. And I was really interested in poetry, how you can say so much in so little. It's a skill which I thought was better than reading volumes of books to get an idea. Whereas in poetry, you can distill an idea into so few words. I thought that was a very interesting art form. So I started writing then when I was 16. But I never shared with anyone. It was still very private until many years later.
Okay. But what made you eventually thought of like publishing some of the works that you have written?
Well, I had written, but I think I spent when I published in 2009. I had already been writing for almost 30 years at that point, or 20 something years, and I already had begun to share some of my work with some people. It got published in a few other anthologies. So when people say, "Hey, actually your poetry is quite nice," you get good feedback, you become a bit more confident. Then you have a collection of work, and then you send it to the publisher, and they say, "Hey, actually this is really good. We'll be willing to publish it." Then it gets published, lor. It's like, it's a
Okay,
trial
okay.
and error journey. I think the more confident you get, then the more you start thinking, "Hey, maybe I can put a book out, right?"
Mm.
And then you get affirmation from other readers and writers and the publisher, then you become a bit more confident lah.
I see. So, has actually poetry actually taught you any interesting life lessons so far, like through writing?
Yeah, a lot. So,
Mm.
so one of the things, in fact, the other day I was invited to speak to secondary school students about my poetry. It's a neighborhood school, and I told them that in order to write, there must be three things, right? You need to have. And these three things is what I learned, and as well that has helped me in my work, right? The first thing is to have the courage to be honest. You cannot be a writer if you are a dishonest writer. You have to be honest with your feelings. And I think this is very true even at work, is to be always courageous to be honest with your feeling, to stand up for something you don't agree with, right? And to to admit that you may be wrong, and in certain aspect, and and to have the courage to fight for what you believe in, right? So as a writer, you also need to have courage to be honest, right? And every voice is unique. The other thing I told the students is competency. You cannot run away from competency. If you want to be good in language, you've got to be good in language. You got to know words. You got to read. This is competency is a given. And I realized that it's the same thing in my work, right? You cannot pretend. You want to be competent. You got to put in the hours. You know, so people will listen to you. And when you make a proclamation or you make a statement or you make a recommendation, it's backed by competency, right? So I told the students as well, this is the same thing in writing, right? And then the last thing I told them is to be conscious. Conscious is in the sense of situational awareness, right? To be conscious of the environment, the people around you, what's going on. To always have, when you look at something, don't just look at it in a very superficial way. Look at it and understand what's around it, what's influencing it. And that's very true in business as well, right? To have situational awareness of your own uh, business that you are operating in, your own department, your own company, whether it's macroeconomics, microeconomics, being conscious of the stakeholders you're dealing with. When you're sitting in a meeting room, look at the body language of people, try and understand is he nervous, fidgeting, anxious? So all these kind of things is also very important in the working world, right? Being conscious and being situationally aware. And that's the same thing I told them when it comes to writing, right? So you are always giving a new perspective, lah. So yeah, so writing has actually complemented. I think I don't think it is on purpose. I think it just happened. You know what I mean? It's not like I started 16 years ago. I had must be courageous lah, but this. I think it has evolved, and it's both in my writing and also at my work, right? I realized that these things have just naturally come up and become things that I now looking back, and when I talk to my sons when they start working, these are the things I tell them, right, at work, right, to always consider these things, right, and I always say, don't set your eye on the next hike, and all these bonuses, and don't get driven by that. Get driven by your passion for your work. Everything else will come. And always be good to people. Don't go and shit on other people because shit will come back to you.
Awesome. Really, really, wow, those very, very wise words from Dr. Sanjay. And to sum it up, it's really about true poetry and true life lessons, really about just being very honest to yourself and just being very passionate about what you do in your work, okay, because eventually those will come back to you. Because if you go with the mindset that you want to get the next pay rise, you want to get the next big opportunity, it will not come to you because you are someone who is a little bit more scarce in the mindset instead of abundantly giving back. So, that's a very good reminder to our
Yeah.
audiences to really just focus on the journey and, of course, just being a good human being as well. Yeah. So, anyways,
Yeah.
thank you, Dr. Sanjay, for all of these nuggets of wisdom. So, now I'm actually really curious about the journey, more about your personal journey. So, as someone who has been through developing a career in maritime and oil and gas trade, I'm sure you actually face a lot of challenges that helped you to grow in your career. So, could you share, one or two memorable experiences that you have been part of in your whole career, and what are the biggest lessons that you learned from it?
Yeah. Oh, wow. When you have a lot of memories, you got to pick out the good ones. I think the one one important pivot moment is when I went to the refinery to work when I was in ExxonMobil. I think that was a very important moment because I was placed in a role of becoming a process engineer, and you're operating with a live unit, which means you cannot make a mistake. And it was the most stressful time of my life because my knowledge and competency gap was, I think, the biggest I've ever seen, even to date. So to close that gap meant that I really had to create 48 hours in 24 hours. I had to double on everything. And the big challenge then also, I had become a new father. My firstborn was also born. So I was sleeping 2 hours, 3 hours a day, between working hard and playing a role as a husband and father, and working through those very difficult. I mean, this went on for months, you know. I was in the refinery for 2 years. So it was the most challenging and most stressful. But what I realized, I began more confidence in myself that because I was able to do it in the end. So that was something that always taught me that, you know what, you should never be fearful of going into an unknown territory anymore. It can't get worse than this, right? I can. So one thing that has taught me is to not be fearful of challenges. There's nothing too hard already, that I cannot survive. So that was a very important period in my life that has made me stronger and really, helped me in my career path, right? Um, I think the other, let me see, significant, significant, yeah. Okay. So I guess there's one, and it lends to the fact of self-confidence and believing in yourself as well. There was one job change which I had decided that I didn't agree with how the company was going and how they were moving forward. I didn't agree with the leadership, you know. So I decided to voice it, and of course, there were consequences for voicing out. But I stood my ground, and even though the leadership tried to I wouldn't say punish lah, but uh try to frustrate me and force me to leave, right? Because I had spoken up against something I believe was fundamentally wrong. I didn't. And I realized that a lot of other people who were implicated by that issue began to stand with me, right? And that gave me the confidence that, in fact, in the end I did leave, but I left on my terms and I left on a very high note. And some of the senior people asked me, why did I even bother to do all these things? Because it caused so much problems for myself. And I remember telling the senior person, I said, I'm a father of two boys. One day, I need to advise my son how to stand up for what you believe in, even though the consequences against you may be bad. And I cannot tell them to do that if I am not prepared to do it. So now that I've done it, I can tell them, right? It's okay to accept a negative consequence if there's something that you really believe in. So these kind of things really shape who I am, so that so I can be very honest with my work. I don't have to pretend anymore. If I don't agree with something, I just speak up, because I've already gone through the difficult journey of having that the consequence. Really, it was really not pleasant, but I survived it, and you know what I mean. And I think these are memorable things that shape who I am, lah. That will always be my character going forward, lah.
Wow, I'm sure your sons will be really, really proud of you and what you really stand for. And that kind of character is something I've noticed in a lot of engineering leaders, that they ultimately at the end of the day, it's not really about what's the most convenient and what's the most easy way out, but rather what's the right thing to do. And as I learned, in life we should always have a stance, because
Yeah,
otherwise you will be forgotten, because you don't have a stance, or people won't treat you seriously. So thanks for sharing,
yeah.
and I can really see that great character that you portray, as an example to your sons as well, lah. Okay, yeah. So Dr. Sanjay, you have actually shared some of your own personal experiences, and I believe, because I mean, as you progress in your career, you also move up to management, and you also led high performing engineering teams, lah. So of course, I believe you will have some lessons of leadership, and of course some sort of self-discovery while doing so. So could you share, I mean, some of the experience that gave you the biggest lessons in terms of leadership?
Yeah, I think um, having a great team is very important. It is always about the team, the we, not the I. And choosing your team carefully, and being very purpose driven in deciding the kind of team you want for the purpose you want, for the objective you want, is very critical for being a good leader. A good leader is not a good manager. A good leader is someone who brings out the best of the entire team, so that they can be more than just the individual parts. That is true. It's a cliche, but it's true. Uh, you know. So as my role as a leader is not to tell people what to do, but is to question why we are doing something or why we're not doing something, to bring out all the best ideas from the experts. Your team should be made of different types of experts, right? You cannot be the sole expert and god of everything, right? So when you get the good team together, then because you ask the right questions, they also grow, and they also are forced to think outside the box to kind of, how do you actually resolve this? Uh, you know, uh, I think leaders must put their ego outside, leave it at home if they have it, or best not to have it. And always be willing to listen to even a subordinate who might be more talented and more right? And focus on the end goal, to make sure that whatever is planned is done properly. So when it comes to innovation and new ideas and everything, it's constantly uh, challenging the team, right, to think beyond possibilities, to give them the courage to 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 think crazy or think beyond something, to give them the courage that it's okay to make a mistake, but as long as you admit it, we learn, fail fast, learn fast, right? You cannot do that if you have a climate of fear for people who don't want to admitting to mistakes, right? So I always trust in my people, and I always say trust is something you own, and you give it away. You know, so if you want to give away your trust, then okay, law. But you hold on to your trust, I will trust you, right? So there's a lot of these different things I think a leader needs to be, more than just a good manager, right? Manager is just you have an established process and you take it through. But a leader brings out a disruptive step, and that takes a mindset of leveraging the team with you, and recognizing not everything is about you me, right? It's about this guy did this in the team, or the team did this together with whoever it is, and give recognition where it's due.
I see. And do you have, and of course, do you have any advice for the younger engineers who are actually working up their way to leadership? What are some of the things that they can actually start to do to start developing themselves towards that route?
Yeah, I think is one of the things to be situationally aware of the kind of leaders they are being subjected to. So look at your bosses, look at your managers. Ask yourself, which traits do you think is good? Which traits do you think is bad? And decide for yourself. Do you want to be the one who perpetuates a bad trait, or do you want to be the one that perpetuates a good trait? How much of this is really something that you want to always remember when you become a leader, right? So the only way to do that is spend less time complaining about your boss, but spend more time to learn from him, both his good and bad, and decide which elements you want to take forward in your own leadership growth journey, right?
Yeah, thanks for sharing on these like pointers, especially on leadership. It's always I always believe that sometimes the what I've learned that the leader or at least the performance of the team is actually a reflection of the leaders inner world, and whatever is actually projected innately in the leader is actually projected onto the team as well. So a great leader will
That's right.
reflect a very, very powerful and cohesive team. Yeah, so thanks Dr. Sanjay on some lessons on leadership. So as we close in on the podcast, and I just wanted to ask you on some advices that you have for the young engineers out there. So as someone who actually grew progress in your career, eventually becoming an engineering leader, and of course having to lead many of these teams, what are some of the common mistakes that young engineers make that jeopardizes their career at the early stage?
I think one is fear of admitting to their mistakes, and therefore perpetuating, because when you make a mistake and you realize your mistake is very stressful, and the earlier you get rid of that stress and admit that you made a mistake to your boss, you can move on and focus on getting the right answer rather than trying to cover up, right? So be confident, and a confident person can admit to their mistakes. So show that confidence that you know where you went wrong, and suggest that this is how we should move forward, and have a discussion with your superiors that way, right? So that's I think that's one thing you should always be prepared to do. The other thing is hard work, competency development cannot run as an engineer. You cannot run from that. These things are bread and butter, foundational stuff to succeed as an engineer, right? And The third thing I would say is treat your fellow team members and treat people the way you want to be treated. You know, treat them with be respectful, be helpful, be compassionate. There's nothing wrong. These sounds like weak traits in a human being. I think these traits are a lot more takes a lot more strength to do than shouting and screaming and things like that, you know. I think if you do that and treat people well, your career will actually be a lot easier and better to manage, and the stresses of work life will become minimum lah.
And on the converse side, right, we talk about mistakes, but now let's talk about, so what can young engineers actually do today, or what are the activities they can do today to actually create these opportunities for themselves in their workplace, especially in a very recessionary environment where there's fears of like layoffs and of course of retrenchment and whatnot lah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question, but I would put relationships up there. Reach out to people who need help. Be kind. And if you're truly an engineer will always look for the most efficient way to do things. So see whether you can improve processes so that you can prevent retrenchment. By improving work processes, things can be made more efficient. So costs can come down. Don't just look at products and services that you are putting out as a company, but look internally how you can make things work better, and use your engineering mind. The engineering mind is very logical, right? So you need to see how you can use that to the best of their advantage to always continuously improve where you work and hopefully save some jobs as well. Especially most jobs are easily measured by cost cutting. So, but there's other ways of managing the bottom line. Other than retrenching, right? So, I mean, so these are the things to constantly work at, at improving. Don't be too quick to jump ship. The grass is not always greener on the other side. But see what you can do internally to make things better.
Okay, awesome. So, Dr. Sanjay, for the last question, do you have any last piece of advice for the audiences out there who are actually watching this, whether they are in a junior role or a more senior role, trying to move up even higher in the top management role?
I guess the one thing would be always I mean, okay, it's my own self motto is to have the courage always to do the right thing.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Dr. Sanjay, thank you for sharing a lot of these raw and authentic advices, that engineers can learn from. And of course, my last question to you is, where can the audiences actually best reach and connect with you for advice, or, even like opportunities down the road?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a good one.
Okay,
The,
cool.
yeah, LinkedIn is a easy way to reach me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll just drop Dr. Sanjay's profile in the link below. Okay, and of course, as we wrap up this episode, thank you, Dr. Sanjay, for being such an awesome guest in the show. And I think one biggest takeaway that I've taken away from your I mean the sharing is really how authentically honest you are with the quality and the passion for the work. I think that is something that you cannot replace in this day and age, where people are trying to show a very good front, but they are not really delivering the absolute best. And of course, just being not only just staying very true to your work, but also true to the values that you encompass. Because of course, that because you want your values to be consistent so that you can be a good role model, not just to your friends, family, but also your eventual sons and daughters as well, which I find it very, very inspiring. Yeah.
No, thank you, Kenny, for the opportunity to share. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, awesome. I'll see you guys in the next podcast.